Hi everybody, I am Husky Light. Thank you for stopping by. Right, as promised today, I'm going to go through two very powerful techniques. They're both quite similar with slightly different endings, but two very powerful techniques. We'll use whichever one is easiest for you to get rid of baggage. We all go through life, and especially as a tarot reader myself, and you know, knowing about the spiritual side of things, I always advise people get rid of your baggage, stop carrying it around with you. When you do that, it causes disease within the body. When you keep repressed feelings inside you, it causes illness. So this is a way to, we've all had those moments in the past that you look back on that really hurt, that are really painful if you think about them. They're still really painful because we've not actually cleared those feelings. We've not forgiven ourselves for what happened at that point in time. We've not forgiven the person involved, and we carry it around with us as baggage, which again causes disease and things like that within the body. Suppressed anger, suppressed guilt, suppressed pain, trauma, all of those things, anguish, grief, everything like that. So two very powerful techniques which can help to clear that, so you can put your baggage down and walk forward a lot freer without those painful emotions that surround that situation or that person. So let's have a look at the first one. I'm going to do this slowly because I have to think my way through it. What you need to do is to get yourself a nice quiet space. Get yourself into a nice, relaxed, quiet position. So sit down, relax, lie down, relax, sit and cross your legs like I've got at the moment, as if you're going to meditate, however you want to do it. And also as well, it's hard to do this. It's not an easy thing to do this. This is our shadow work. This is really delving into the things that make us hurt in order to clear it. But when it works for you, it's an amazing feeling, and it frees you and it stops you carrying pain. You can use this in any situation that you've had, whether it be a moment in your past where you split up with somebody, that moment when you were fired at work, that moment when you were mugged on the street, that moment, whatever that traumatic moment, whether it's from childhood, whether it's from a few months ago, a few years ago, even if it's just from the last few days, whatever that trauma is, you can help to clear it, as long as you're not actually in the moment, in the centre of it. For instance, if you're currently breaking up with somebody, then you can't clear that emotion. You have to go through that pain as it is in order to get to the other side. You can't clear something like that when you're in the centre of it. But when it's in the past and you look back on things and sort of say, God, you know what, if I'd have said something different, if I'd have done this thing instead of this thing at the time, if I'd have walked away, if I'd have made a different decision at that point, how would it have changed things? So say, get yourself nice and comfortable, get yourself nice and relaxed. Your imagination is going to come in here. Close your eyes for me, take some nice deep breaths and get relaxed. Start to use your imagination. I want you to go back to that moment in time when that happened, that situation with that person, that thing that you saw, that situation that you witnessed, whatever it was that you know that you're carrying with you, which still hurts. You can hardly speak about it, you don't want to look at it, and you carry it around as your story as well. And sometimes some of you can't speak about it, and sometimes, you know, whenever you meet someone new, you sort of bring that into the conversation as one of your past traumas, and oh, this happened to me and it was so terrible. And so go back to that point that you feel particularly bad about. Imagine in your head that you are back in that moment, that you are re-experiencing what actually happened then. Breathe as deeply as you can through this. Start to remember the emotions that came with that situation, with that trauma. and you've got in your imagination, it's almost being literally stood back in that moment, going back into the past and reliving it, and we're bringing up the emotions that come up with it as well. Realise it and imagine it in as much full colour as you can. If you end up crying, that's fine. Just imagine it. Bring up those feelings that need to be re-brought up in order to clear them, and imagine what's going on there. Now, I want you to imagine that you're in the moment, but then suddenly you step outside of that and you take a photograph. You take a photograph of that situation. So for instance, if you imagine you're in the middle of a really bad, maybe abusive argument with an ex-partner or somebody, you step back, you take a snapshot of it, and you have a photograph in your imagination in front of you. Now at the moment that photograph is in full colour, you can feel all the feelings, you can feel all the emotions. I want you to now imagine that you are going to start to drain the colour from the photograph. That photograph is now going to turn into a black and white photograph. As you imagine doing that and the colour is draining from that photograph, so too do the emotions and the feelings that went with that situation. Everything is just draining out of it, so it's not real anymore. It's just a photograph. In fact, it's not just a photograph, it's a black and white photograph. Doesn't even have colour in it. It's grey, it's drab. You're looking at it and it starts to not mean anything to you anymore. As you are looking at this photograph, I want you to imagine holding this photograph, which is now black and white, which pictures the scene that was trauma, but you have drained the emotion out, you have drained all the colour out. Hold that photograph in front of you and start to rip it up into little pieces, as many pieces as you can rip that photograph up into. You have all these broken pieces, all these tiny little pieces of that ripped up photograph in your hand. Either throw them as far as you can, or hold your hand open and just imagine a big gust of wind coming along and blowing all of those pieces of that photograph away. And as you do that, the emotions fade, the grief fades. It doesn't feel half as bad as it did before when you look at it. It doesn't mean anything anymore. That's technique number one. You can do that a couple of times a week, 3 times a week, until it's clear, as many times as you need to do it. And every single time you do that technique, it fades and it fades, and the emotions are released, and then they are lessened and lessened till it becomes no baggage. You're not carrying it around with you anymore. Now, the second technique, which is similar but works on the same, it's a little bit different. Again, get yourself into a nice, quiet, relaxed place where you're not going to be disturbed by anybody. Close your eyes, start to relax, start to breathe very deeply, be as calm as you can be while you're getting relaxed. And I want you then to go back again to that traumatic experience which you can't seem to get out of your head, that you're not clearing, that you know that you're carrying around with you. Be in that moment, be back, relive that experience, relive that past moment within you, within your imagination. Hear the sounds around you, hear the full colour, what's going round, whether you were outside, inside. Make it as real as possible within your head. Get to that moment where that trauma started, or get to that moment where you know your mind changed at that point, where you either made a mistake or you didn't want it to happen or something. Freeze frame it, stop it. Now think to yourself what you said and what you did in that situation. If you could relive it all over again today, how would you change it? What would you do in order to change those circumstances? Would you have said something different to that person? Would you have walked out? Would you have hit them? What do you need to do to change that situation, to make the past a different story to you, in order to make you feel better? What in that moment should you have done which would have made you feel so much better in that moment that you don't have to carry it around with you? Imagine that. Get back into the moment again where you freeze framed it, and instead of carrying that story on in your head, you're now going to change it. If somebody is really having a go at you, if there's, just stand there and turn around and say, do you know what? I love you, but I'm walking away. Turn around, full of pride, walk away. End of. Whatever the situation, however you feel you wished you dealt with that situation at the time, that's what you're now going to, excuse me, that's what you're now going to imagine in your head. Do that. See how differently that feels. See how less painful that is. See how happy you are. Do it until you've got the right result. Do it until you're happy with that situation, the way you are reliving it. You've changed your past. That past is now different than how you remember it. It's now got a different ending. There's a different ending to that story. The old memory has been changed. The old baggage doesn't have to be carried around with you anymore, because that changed your story. It's changed for you. You feel happier about it. You've been put in a position where you can make yourself feel better, more self-confident, and you've dealt with it the way you wanted to deal with it, in order to put it to bed, in order for you not to have to carry any pain and grief around with you. So those are the two techniques. They're a little bit similar, but go with whichever one feels best for you, and do that as many times as you need to. And I guarantee that every time you do that, you will start to feel better and better. The first time you do it, it's painful. Shadow work, that's what you're doing. You're bringing stuff out. You know that you've been carrying this around for years, and you don't know how to change it. You don't know how to get rid of these feelings. And when you first do it, it can hurt, and those feelings are resurging again. But they are being brought up to the surface. They are being looked at to be released, so that you don't have to get ill. You don't have to carry them around with you anymore. So I hope this helps. If there's any questions, let me know on that. But I find this to be very powerful. It's something that I've used in my past, and it's something that I use sometimes when I'm doing spiritual counselling with any of you out there as well. So I do know how much and how well it works. There's things that you don't need to carry around with you anymore, and you've got a couple of techniques there to be able to change it. So namaste, blessings, light, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.